welcome to another sewing tutorial. This time it is more of like a fairy fantasy top plus a very basic skirt. So I'm not modeling the skirt because this is not actually my size. I figured I would model it anyway and squish myself into it. It is a leafy pattern. It is very versatile. One comment I want to make is that if you want the undersides of your ruffles to be the same color as the top side, do not use a printed fabric. But that was not the problem, or that was not something that I was concerned with this outfit for the person that it's for. So that wasn't even something we considered. This is a very versatile item. Like right now I feel very much like I'm a ranger or a druid or something like that. I could throw on wings and be a fairy. Speaking of druids, what else do I have? Alright, so druid. You can accessorize with this to make it look more of what you're going for so that it fits more of that theme. Maybe the antlers aren't quite your forte. What about maybe horns are more your thing? So again, you can just accessorize. I didn't do my hair because normally when I wear these I would have curly hair to kind of hide the headband. But as is, pretty cute. Very versatile. Maybe you don't like the neckline. Maybe you want something else. So maybe something more like this. Well, maybe not with the horns, because then you can't really admire the back of it. This is a capelet I made many, many years ago for a different outfit, but it works if you want something that has a cape, or a capelet. This one's got two different layers. It has a hood, which I can't model off with these horns, so I guess. Or a capelet like this with the hood up, and there's little wings attached to it at the bottom, so that you can have wings without them being out and over like this. So I guess it really depends on your preference, but this is a very versatile pattern for if you just want it to be the base of something and then build up on it. It would actually look really good with that coat that I made last week. Like, have fun with it. It's Halloween. It's a costume. Have fun. So the fairy pattern that I'm working with is this one. This is actually based on two pieces of artwork that were then turned into a costume. So I've actually worked with this pattern before, and I ended up looking up the designer, or like looking up and seeing how exactly they did the edging. So I will explain that in a moment. And I followed the same, so I'm doing this one minus this corset, and I will explain why in a moment. But I did follow this basic color scheme where it's dark, light, darker. So let me explain what I've done. So this, I already cut all of my elastic, so that's what this bag is for. This doesn't involve embellishments because I'm not doing the corset, and I'm not adding any trims. So this is the sleeve. So the sleeve itself is going to be the darker leafy pattern, and then the lighter one is going to be the ruffle. It was decided that we were going to use the lighter fabric as a trim of sorts on everything. So this back panel was supposed to be two pieces, but then I figured out that after I cut this front panel into two pieces, you end up sewing it together anyway. So I was like, well, I'll just fiddle with that later. So this is the back and the front, and you see there's a lot of jagged, curved edges. And then this is the ruffle, again, the lighter green, that will be on top. And you can't even see that. Let me scoot it down. There you go. So that'll be the lighter fabric on top of the darker fabrics for the top ruffle, or for the neck ruffle on top. Move everything out of the bowl. Actually, I take that back. I will move 3 pieces out of the way. But I'll keep that one. Okay. And then, so the skirt, if you saw, actually has 2 layers. So there is this bottom layer, which is all the same. Like, I've cut 4 of them. 2 for the front, 2 for the back. And you put it, so so that the point is perpendicular. So instead of having the point directly under like this, it'll be more like an off-center point, more like that. So that that longer piece is covering this shorter piece up here. But again, should be a fair decent length for a shirt. I call this a skirt. It's going to end up being more of a tunic length. And all of these jagged edges. I will explain them. Well, actually, let me explain how those are going to be done. Because my next order of business is on every single piece that needs edging. Is I'm going to be following the directions that I saw. Which is basically, you attach a piece of string with a needle right here to hold on to, and then you zigzag stitch from this point to this point. Put another string, zigzag from this point to this point, this point to this point. You can do it on a serger, or you can do it on a sewing machine. I'm doing it on the sewing machine because I feel like I have a lot more control that way, and I just can't imagine trying to do a ruled hem on some of these really tight, at really tight curves. So on the sewing machine, it's basically, I'm going to grab this, hold really tightly, and basically almost turn this into a straight line, because I will be pulling like this and zigzagging from edge to edge. And it will cause it will cause a little bit of kind of that lettuce edging, which will look cool when everything's gathered anyway. I have two colors of thread specifically for the edging. A light olive and a darker olive. Then we have this bottom skirt. Here's the casing, and then here's the skirt. So we've decided this one should just be a solid color. I believe this comes in 3 different pieces, and this is going to be mostly done on the serger, because all I need to do is all of the side seams, gather it to this, sew it, and then the hem. So this will be the easiest of this entire process. And that's the skirt. Okay. Why did I not do the corset? So this is cut out in a plus size. Especially since I have to wear it very briefly for the intro. If your corset is the length of my hand, it's too small for my size. And so, because of that's a waist cincher, and especially when it's supposed to come up over the bust like it does in the photo. So I have a feeling that the model in the photo is very petite, and that they didn't size up correctly for the size of plus size adults. Because there is no way that this corset is coming up over the bust on me. For the length of my hand, it's not going to happen. And you can also see that it's supposed to go past the waist, and that just, like, my fingertip goes to my waist. So, when I pulled up that pattern piece, I decided that that is not going to happen. I'm not going to sew something that is so clearly not going to look good and not going to work. So, I will be making a corset in my off time to go with this, or go buy one, but I am not feeling up to making this corset in a way that's not going to look flattering, it's not going to work. So beware when you buy patterns where, like, the model is clearly a different proportion than you are, because sometimes the patterns are not scaled appropriately to the bigger sizes. That being said, you can get a lot of different specified patterns specifically for corsetry, both commercially and from individual designers who have worked with these commercial industries like Simplicity. So beware of that. That is particularly why I didn't make this corset. Other than that, I'm going to start on all this edging. See all the edging. All this edging. And so instead of being dark like this edging at the neck and the sleeve is made out of the lighter fabric right here on this one that I'm making. And I saved the waist cincher that I did not like from the coat to actually go right here where that seam and elastic is going to be, just to add some division when I wear it, if you're wondering where that came from. And I don't decide to mention it in the intro. but that is where we're going. I'm going to go ahead and go off camera and start sewing these. Again, just you're going to do the method I did earlier, where you grab the point with the needle and thread. You don't tie a knot, you just pull on it, and then sew from point to point, pulling as taut as you can. I might film briefly me doing that, but I'm not sure how well it's going to show on camera. So I did all of the green edging, and this is what I figured out. So the technique requires you to put sew on the wrong side. Because when the fabric curls, you want it to curl on the wrong side so it isn't as visible. For 2, you put a thread at each of these points to anchor it as you maneuver it. So what I would do is start here, of course on the wrong edge, start here, go all the way down, have the anchor already here before I ran it over, go over this edge, use the anchor to position this tip back where I want it to go under, to go this way, and then I would pull on that top thread until it was snug, and then go again. So I don't end up with extra, like, loops and stuff. Then I'm going to show you really briefly how you do a French seam. French seam, you sew wrong sides together. This is a 1/4 inch hem, or a seam. Then you trim it, so it's even smaller, so closer to 1/8. Do not cut too close that you cut the threads, or that the threads might come out. And then for the final seam, you put right sides together, make a pocket, and sew that pocket where the raw edge is. Then your seam looks nice and pretty. So that's what I did for the seam. Also on all of these points, I put fray check on just the points where I have that transition, so that it stays nice and pretty. So I'm going to finish up this skirt and then show you the next part. I chose to do French seams is that French seams and elastic is amazing together, especially when you're putting an elastic between 2 pieces like you do on the sleeve. So the sleeve, I'm going to go ahead and do a French seam. I'm going to sew wrong sides together. And then when I turn and make that pocket, I'm going to make that pocket big enough to put the elastic in. Now, what I'm going to have to do for the elastic is to put it in ahead of time because of the way that this is assembled. So I'm going to make sure that that pocket's big enough, put my elastic in, stay stitch it on either end, or on either end of where the sleeve is, so that it's ready for the next piece. So this sleeve is ready to go. Remember that depending on how big your elastic is, depends on how big your casing should be. I know I'm one of the few lucky people that actually have thin elastic. It was from my stash. So this is what it should look like when it's done. I sewed each end with the elastic so that when I spread it, it ruches up again. I did not follow the guide that they had come with for the elastic, because everybody's body is different, everybody's arm is different, so this is better to measure and then cut so that it is a comfortable amount of ruching. This of course will relax more once it is fully washed, instead of being as stiff as it is right now. The sleeve is done. Now what? Then you need to match the curves, so of the armhole. So you need to match the back to back, right sides facing outward, and then front to front. The big key with this is to make sure that you don't get your back and front mixed up when you decide to put the skirt on. I might get this project done without any huge harassment from cats. Ah! Okay, so I have French seamed the parts where the front and back meet the sleeve. So now the next part is to do this underarm seam. So match up the 2 seams and then go nuts. Do not sew the sleeve ruffle. So you're going to sew from here to here to here. Trim, turn wrong side out, and then seam that pocket. And then at this point, I can either do the neck ruffle or the skirts. I haven't decided which one I'm going to do first yet. Alright, so this underarm is done. It is French seamed. And you'll notice there's pins on the top. So this is the front, which means that I have pinned this ruffle so that it will flow all the way over. I'm going to go ahead and sew this first seam with the dark thread that I already have in the machine, so that it's attached, and then I'll do the top stitching for it in the lighter green so that it blends in more with this. So the reason this neck ruffle should fit with like these two pieces just barely touching, and that's where your elastic is going to go through. As you can see, I've zigzagged these two stitch things so that they are completely sealed. I'm going to go ahead and sew this, leave it, and then I'm going to do the skirt on the bottom, and then finish that when I have the thread. Alright, so for the skirt, I have it pinned so that so it's sideways. So there are 4 total of these panels and 2 of these ones. So this is off center, so this is the center of one panel, and then there's halves of 2 other ones. And so the longest point is in the center to draw your eyes towards it. And I just feel like it kind of meshes better with the whole layout of this. Of course, you could change your mind and have it so that the longer panels are right here where this more shallow area is. But again, that's all personal preference and how you do it. So it's pinned right now. It's ruffled on the back end, so I'm going to go ahead and top stitch this, take out the basting that I used to ruffle, and then I'm ready to put the top and skirt together. Bottom and top are connected. This is my non-roll elastic for this center, so I need to keep in mind when I make my seam, it needs to be big enough to fit this. So when I get this done, I'm going to make sure to leave a hole on the inside seam to feed this through. Elastic is threaded through and everything's been pulled tight and then ruched in on its own. So everything's done except the neck. So the neck, I need to fold down and top stitch all the way around, leaving a casing specifically big enough for that piece of elastic that I showed earlier. I'm going to do this in the lighter thread so it blends in really well, like the thread that's on the edge. And then I will make sure to close this area because I'll be able to feed the elastic through this hole right here in the center. So I will do that and show you the end result. So I put in the neckline elastic. It did need to be tightened up a little bit. I did end up leaving a hole back here because it is easier to feed it through there than through here. Which you can always close up if you want. I tend to leave it open so that, like, if I have to make modifications. So, the top is done. It's pretty, but it is much too stiff. So, not all fabrics are created equal. I did not pre-wash this. I did iron it and shrink it, because I do like having some stiffness to help with French seaming. So this is going to be tossed in the washer and dryer so that it loses all of that stiffness. And we'll see how it goes. But yeah, you can always adjust how your ruching sits because this is a bit smaller than just the fabric stretched all the way out. So you can just move and migrate everything to kind of have where you want the fabric to bunch up most to stay there. Here is a super basic skirt. We have 3 identical panels that need to be sewn up the sides into a circle. Then they will need to be basted on the top to be ruffled down to fit this waistband. I already did mess with the waistband a little bit, and I backstitched an opening for the elastic to be fed through. I am going to break out the serger for this because I don't want to French hem a bunch of these, because they're not going to be seen. Alright, I'll show you what I am at. Too soon about Jarvis leaving me alone. Alright, so I serged the seams, the hem, and the top portion so that it was all even and cut. So now what I'm going to do is put a basting stitch to gather this into the waist casing, sew that together, and then flip it over, sew it again, and basically make everything look nice. So I will be back in a moment. Is the skirt. So this casing should have had two, because it was much too small for the 1 inch. So I have a 3/8 inch one in here. You can whip stitch this open, leave it as is, like right here. It is a very basic skirt. What I ended up doing, because it was obviously too small, was to serge the waist casing together and then just sew the two together so it has a nice finished edge on the inside, and then have right sides out. Again, this is going to be a covered skirt. Nobody's going to see how some of the serge is still showing. So overall, not a bad skirt. Again, waist casing needs to have two if you want a larger waistband. And since the material for this particular skirt is so light, I felt really comfortable doing a 3/8 inch. So I did not have access to a washer on short notice, so I hand washed and then tossed into a dryer so that it got beat. So it did shrink, obviously. I did account for that when I cut it, though. It'll probably shrink some more, which again, this is supposed to be really ruchy, so it can be as light or as baggy as you would like. So I ironed, my husband lovingly ironed the ruffle of the neck down again because it did start to curl after going through the dryer. This flows a lot better. A lot of the stiffening washed out. Let me tell you how dirty that water was. The fray check is still there though. But overall, a wash and dry made this a lot less stiff and makes it look just so much nicer. It lost a lot of the bulk it had before. But that is how that looks. The wild Jarvis, always at his mom's feet, always wanting her attention and mewing at her and never letting her do anything in peace. If you would like to see more of this wild Jarvis as he gets older and bigger, please like, comment, and subscribe.